So it's really helpful when we can see that the cool tone against the warm skin tone of the character. And also you have some better shaping that's on the character face, so she's looking a lot more appealing right now. So very nice job. And also I see you also added some more bounce light on the character, which is something I was going to say. So I think overall the character, the shaping is working fairly well. I guess the rest would be like we might have to figure out what's the best way to have all these different colors of light source that work together. Because in your references, I don't really see that many cool lights. We have the exception, which is this bar that has some green light that's coming from the bottom. But they're pretty far from the character, so it doesn't affect the character as much. So right now we have this is perfectly realistic and possible, but as an image itself, the color palette, I think we can possibly figure out what's the best way to coordinate these colors together so it works together as an image. Because we have two types of cool tone. One is this cool tone from this light, one is this cool tone from the shirt, and several warm tone. We have this yellow cabinet lights. Her skin is fairly warm. Their skins are fairly warm, hit by the different warm light, presumably from the wall over here, and her dress is red. So we have a lot of different warm and cools. That's all kind of slightly different. And that can be a little bit confusing for us visually. So I think it will be helpful if we can simplify to figure out what kind of if we're going to cooler lights, if they're going to separate the color a little bit differently on the shirt and the light itself, or we can possibly have this light effect maybe even more on the foreground. So because right now we are seeing a lot of light sources that are all kind of compete against each other, as well as their hue. And compared to the references, they're usually slightly more monochromatic. Like when we look at these images, the overall palette is either warm or cool. Well, we don't have a cool in this one, but overall, it's really just warm tone with hints of blue cool accents. Does that make sense? The color palette in the image part?
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So I think and the character overall is looking pretty good. And I guess from what I am reacting to just the image right now, I see that you have a top-down light, and also this light over here, that is the main light source. But the top-down light doesn't quite feel as top-down. Like it's not having that top-down, casting down these kind of strong shadows on them right now, on the chin, on the neck. Sometimes I understand that we have to cheat the angle a little bit to make sure the character lighting is not doesn't sometimes cast ugly shadows. But right now I think we can possibly have some shadows, like I'm not seeing that much shadow that's under her chin, or like around the belt, that's when after her breast is dipped in, just in general. So I'm kind of on light direction wise, I'm not reading this light that's hitting most of this area as top down as much. It reads more like there's a light over here somewhere behind her, that's up here, that's hitting this at this angle. So if we want to create more of like a practical light sources, that's something that's more like this. We might have to consider bringing some of the shadows back just so we can convey that feeling of there's a light coming from top down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so for this, the very last one, I did add like a different light. The one that's kind of red and dark, it is only from top. So you're saying like getting shadows like that one? Sorry.
The red
Like the
dark.
previous one before this one?
I think even in the previous one, I think this one doesn't work very as well as this one because the shaping on the character is not as appealing as this one. With the fill lights coming in, filling some of these darker areas on her face, the overall expression looks a lot better. But if you're saying that, is this a top-down light that we're seeing? This light over here?
Yes.
Is the position of the slide like right here?
It's like across the whole bar.
The whole bar, like this one?
Like the kitchen island. Like the island thing.
So the light itself is a fairly large lamp. It's not just a one single spotlight.
Yes, okay. That one, it's
that
like that. And,
okay.
Yeah, and the other one that I just added is a spotlight.
Okay.
That one.
This one's a spotlight.
Yes.
I think I'm not seeing that big of a difference in shaping wise. I can see that there's a warm light direction that's very similarly hitting the same area. There's only a light that's filling in the shadow, which makes her look a lot more appealing. I guess I was looking mostly at this as like your top-down light reference, because I'm just reading more of these like strong lights that's coming just from like one relatively small light source. But if this is the case, if what we're going for, I'm guessing this is probably closer to what you're looking for. I guess I was a little confused because you said you wanted to look the reference you mentioned La La Land, so I was looking at the La La Land image. But if this is closer, then I think this light direction could work. And I'm wondering if we should slightly darken the shadow a little bit, just a little bit, to give it more that interior feeling. So this right now is kind of have a lot of bounce light around them, so it doesn't read as much as interior, like a moody lunch feeling. It has a lot of it feels like there's a lot of light turned down on half the ceiling, so the overall character is more filled and brighter than your references. So maybe we can try that. So darkening the shadows and bring the shadow a little, and just like make the character a little more contrasty, at least on the body part. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay. I will move on to Vedat. So, I think this is very interesting that you have if you did all of these by yourself, that's really cool. There's a lot to work on by one person, so very nice job in general. So for the most part, I think for reading of the shot, I think is working very decently. The character is definitely the main focus we're going to look at. If you're looking for lighting feedback, I just have a few things, which will be for the brighter area where the candles are still on. I think we can possibly darken the back wall a little bit so the character can stand out a little bit more against the wall, so it can just have a better read. In addition to that, we can possibly slightly reduce the specular highlights that's on the floor. This is probably a little bit too definitely very heavy-handed and lower, darkening all these specs. It will probably still have some brighter areas, but I'm assuming a candle that's such a small light source probably wouldn't cast these broad specular highlights. So I can kind of see in the specular that the size of the light source is actually bigger than the candle itself, because specular highlights are reflection in a way of the light source. So my brain is kind of registering these kind of highlights usually are not casted by these kind of small tiny candle lights. So we can possibly look into that if there's anything that we can do to reduce the scale and also the brightness of these specs, so that so they won't kind of compete against our main characters. Because right now they're kind of unfortunate. They're both equal size, almost the same size of characters in the skeleton, and one of the skeletons is sitting right on top of it. So I think that could help us. In addition to that, I think overall the characters are reading well. I do see that the fill size seems quite lifted. There's some really strong light that's hitting all these shadow area. It's kind of competing against the key light source, which is, I think, these lights from the window in this case. The candle lights add some very nice room to him, and he does sculpt out really well against the background. But we can possibly lower the fill light a little bit on the characters' faces and body to make sure that overall the shaping is created by this key light. And the skeleton, I feel like the highlight on the skeleton in this area seems a little bit more saturated compared in a different hue compared to the candle light sources. And there seems like there's a little particular light that's just hitting the skeleton, which is we possibly do need that to make sure he reads clearly. But we're not seeing similar source on the character or the sword. So it would be helpful to maybe bring the hue of this light source more closer to these candle light and the room light that's on him. And in addition to that, I think the last thing would be for the swords that he's holding. It's a very important prop that he's using, so we can possibly figure out if there's any way we can change materials or have a light that's particularly used for the sword so it can read very well against the background, and when also especially when the character is waving it around, that we can read them very clearly. And the part after the candle goes out, I think overall it's the heavy fog kind of help us to resolve some of the issues we're having here, which is a lot of stuff that could possibly distract our eyes. The fog kind of covers up all that, so it helps. And I will have a similar note on how the shadow seems quite lifted by a certain light, another light, or maybe it's calm that we lift the dark. I think we can bring back the dark on the shadow side a little bit. And as well as this whole foreground area, the skeleton's head is very nicely lit. It reads very well, but the rest of its body kind of get blended in with the background. And so does this case is leaning on. So if possible, I think it will be helpful to just bring back the contrast here a little bit, so we can also see what the skeleton is doing. And same thing and then also bring back the contrast in the shadow on the character, as well as the sword. Just the same as the candle shot. If there's anything we can do with materials or lighting that make sure we can read it very well, because the value right now, it kind of blends in very closely against the background. So yeah, I think that's all. I think these are the notes I have for now. I think it's really interesting, fun stuff. So hopefully this helps, and let me know if any questions. And then we have Dipali. Hopefully I'm saying your name right. I see that you're also doing the unexpected catch, which is really cool. And you're actually using, I guess, the concept art for the lighting itself, which is nice. It's actually, I don't think I've seen the concept art before, so this is really cool to see. And I think right now you do have a lot of stuff that's working really well and really closely to the concept. The watercolor is nice. The sky does have that magical, almost like unicorn palette colors. And the characters offer a very good start. I'm also seeing that you're using Moana as your main reference. I do want to say that Moana is a very stylized, has a very stylized look when it comes to a sunny daytime looking. So if this is, and you can even see that between the two images that you have chosen, even though they're both in a very similar time of day feeling, the lighting actually is quite different already on these two characters. So I'm gonna probably use mostly this image as kind of like where I will be trying to give notes to help with the shot. So, but let me know if you're looking for something that's more like this one, because the features and the light directions actually, I think that are quite different. To start off, I think the characters already have really nice shaping, but I am curious to see if we can clearly define a key light direction. So in the references, we can see that there's a key light coming from probably the back of the screen hitting her, and you can see the boat, and when her shadow is casting on the boat, the sun is coming from the behind. Versus, I'm not quite sure if there's a strong singular light source in this image I can call as key light. It seems like they're very evenly lit in general. Looks almost as if it's more overcast than a sunny feeling. So if it's possible, I think we can try having a stronger light coming from the back of the screen, possibly hitting the hat from this side, the boat, this side of the hair, some of the face, the tail, as the key light. I think right now the mermaid does have something that's similar to the shaping of Moana here. That's this light over here, because the shadow is so soft, which actually works quite well. Versus, like, we can see that Moana has actually quite sharp shadows under her chin area, and so is under her body. Her body's casting a fairly sharp shadow. So I can still register this as sunlight, and we don't have something similar here in our current lighting right now. So we can possibly work on that. On the flip side of that, to create a sunny feeling, usually in addition to a strong key light source, we usually have some pretty clearly defined shadows. So I was mentioning that she has some pretty dark shadow because clearly casted from the sun. If we do choose the sunlight coming from the back, similar to your references, we could possibly see some shadow that's on this side of the boy's body, as well as this side of the boat. Like, actually, possibly most of the boat will be in shadow. And similarly with the mermaid, a good chunk of her body will probably be in shadow, so we would tell. Like I said, you have some nice bounce light coming from the bottom from the water. That works really well. We can definitely keep that. But overall, I'm just looking for a stronger key light and shadow that defines the direction of the sun. Secondly, I think this is definitely something I brought up a lot just for this one particular lighting challenge, that will be the shaping of the mermaid's hair, since this is such a big part of the character and it also takes a big part of this frame. So it would be great if we can shape the hair that retains the feeling of this is an overall a circular sphere shape, that as if they'll be lit by the sunlight, have a sunlight hitting here, have a key side that rolls up into a shadow side, but maintain some of these nice detail you already have. I think these nice little curls that you're picking up from the sky is very great. We're just missing a little bit of the strong key light that's also hitting the hair, that's also shaping this as like a sphere that her head is. And on the boy's hair, I think his hair strands are looking really, really well. For some parts that's a little bit under the head, the specular highlight does get quite bright. I'm kind of curious if there's particular light that's creating the specular highlight on the hair, which definitely helps, but we could possibly consider lower a little bit, because right now it kind of draws a little bit of attention of these blue specular that's on his hair. And last but not the least, I think, I'm not sure what is causing this, but I'm seeing these stripes on the water. It's just very unfortunate because it kind of creates a pattern that draws my eye to it. So if it's possible, maybe we can try to either look into the texture that we're using, or looking at the shaping of the shape of this geo, and what's possibly giving us these kind of stripes. But I think overall this is a very good start. It's I think the sky color and everything is working really well. The overall palette is really nice. We just probably have to work on the character overall shaping a little bit. So yeah, please let me know if any questions, and hopefully this helps, and hopefully this is still, if this is not the kind of mood you're trying to go for, please let me know if you have any other references and I can help you with that. And for Ubedullaha, sorry if I'm saying your name correctly. So hi, nice to meet you. So I see you're doing Unreal environment lighting, and this is very cool looking sci-fi set. And looking at references, these are all very good references for this particular set. So but I think of all of these, I'm guessing you're going for this one probably is the closest one compared to your current lighting, so I'm gonna probably mostly use this one to give notes on. So I think overall this is already quite successful, that the material and the set itself is already very interesting, has a lot of elements that our eyes can look at, and also the perspective of the shot is very straightforward. So overall, with the light that you have in here, it's all working fairly well. I guess and the first thing I noticed, and this could be just because of my monitor, because I don't have a color corrected monitor at home, is the dark area in your shot right now are relatively a lot contrasty and darker than your references. So we can see that in your reference, all these dark area are still have quite a bit of bounce light, and gets lifted a lot more than what you have in here. It depends on the kind of mood you want to achieve, because when you have these kind of really darks and strong light and contrast, it creates a certain mood that usually is a little bit more thriller, dangerous feeling. And I think in this one, it's a little bit softer. It's more like a exploring, almost magical kind of feeling. So it's up to you on which kind of mood you're trying to go for. And also this could be my monitor, so it's not showing me that much detail in the dark. So please let me know if this is something that you're going for. If not, I think as this is also okay. But for this one, I think even though its lighting scenario is very similar, this one I would say we might do have to pay more attention to the dark areas, because in this particular frame we have a lot more dark elements that's taking up about half of the shot. And when we have so much areas in the dark, unless we're particularly trying to hide things for our storytelling points, in general, our eyes will start wandering around the shot and trying to see what's happening in here. So I think in general, if we can bring a little bit more detail, like these nice speculars and these nice broad like bounce light into these areas to have, so we can read a little bit better on what's happening here and here, it will be very helpful. I really like these glow that you have around the sun. I think these are really successful. That makes it very interesting. But I do wonder if it's slightly we have a little bit of competing things going on here. We have a very bright red lights over here and also on the floor, and I'm not sure if this is actually a light source or just a red duffel bag, because the hue and the shape itself are also similar to these kind of red lights we have on the set. If this is just the bag itself, we might want to have a light just to make sure it reads like a bag, like this one over here, so it doesn't kind of confuse us as another red light over here. If this was actually in game setting, this will probably be particularly important, because the players they're probably looking for an item that they can use in the duffel bag, or looking for light source for signals. So having some separation of these kind of shapes and color versus this bag will be very helpful. And similarly for this shot, if it's possible, I think we can bring up all the dark area in these wall and the ceiling, especially considering it has quite a bit of opening coming from the window and the door, with a strong sunlight hitting here. I see some bounce light, but I think probably it can go a little stronger to hit more of these darker areas here. And this is also just like a relatively smaller thing, but I was looking at your previous image, this other render that you have, the exposure outside of this hallway. It looks, for me, my eyes read this as more like a bright sky than this one, since they both have similar setting. They're exposing for the interior, so the sky gets fairly blown out. But for this one, I'm not sure if this is just a sunlight hitting like a snowstorm, so it's creating this bright kind of almost like fog feeling. But I can see if this is just a snow being blown up by the wind, the sun's hitting them. But the sky overall here doesn't have this kind of nice exposed, overexposed feeling, which is what I would expect if we're exposing more for the interior. So if possible, I think it will help if we can just slightly brighten the sky a little bit. But that's fairly minor. It's not like a huge note that I really, and I said we must do. It's just a suggestion. But yeah, I think having just a little bounce light on these dark areas overall will be very helpful to shape the side of the image. And that's pretty much all I have. I think this is a very good looking set. You did a great job lighting it. So please let me know if there's any particular kind of mood you're trying to achieve. This reads like Snowpiercer to me almost. But yeah. So if you have any question on the notes I was giving, please let me know. Oh, that one last thing. Almost forgot. I'm kind of curious, what is this yellow fog in the foreground? Is this... Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I know there's a yellow thing down here. It could be the bounce light coming from here, but it looks like a little fog that's just here and not anywhere else. Kind of just curious. It kind of draws the eye because this is the only yellow thing in the frame. So That's all. Just wondering. And for Abishek, so I see that. And sorry, Abishek, I didn't see your DM about asking for my email again. Sorry, my DM. I don't look at my DM very often. So I think overall, the fog is covering the whole frame now, which is great because this is what I more expect. What we expect what fog would look like more naturally. But I think it could still be a little bit too thick. And just to kind of quickly do the slap count just to show like what I mean, like the fog level I kind of expect to have this kind of lighting, which I just took your previous render with no fog and mix it with the current render that you had fog. That kind of just makes it like 25%, 20% in of the fog. So we still have some of these foggy feeling that's covering the background and the sky, but not as heavy, that reads like overcast kind of feeling. So hopefully this is something we can achieve, and I'll definitely take a look at your renders and see if it's something we can do. But this is just the overall kind of feeling of how the fog level that we should have to get this kind of magical but not too blocking the background and also the moonlight feeling. And then I see that I really fixed it specular on the crowd, which is cool. I still see a little bit of blue speck that's over here on the mermaid's tail. Kind of curious what that is. If we can get this sort out, that would be great. And also, I don't know if you heard it was probably in the recording. I probably didn't say it to you when you jumped in later. I was talking about how this specular on the cheek is a little bit unfortunately shaped that looks almost like like a dimple or blush that's just like painting into the texture. So I think it would be great if we can slightly soften and blur it out so it doesn't perfectly sits right here. That kind of draws a bit of attention. And now I look a little bit closer. I think it will be helpful if we can slightly darken her eyebrow a little bit so we can read the dark eyebrow a little better and doesn't blend in with the rest of her face. But I think the boy overall is looking great. Shaping is very nice, along with the hat and the boat. So very nice job on that. So yeah. I'll probably talk to you offline and see if I can get those passes and we can probably discuss it a little more. And for Paul, yeah, I see that you made some updates and fixed some of the lines that you had before, which is great. On the hair back, as well as on the background. Overall, this is reading really well. I think the biggest thing that I still react to is the shader of the skin itself. It still feels quite glowy and almost a little orangey. So I was looking at references. I don't have it here. Where do I have it? Somewhere. Anyways, so I did just like quickly and kind of color corrected and what I expect this kind of skin texture and the color will look like even with subsurface. I mostly just pulled down the orange color that's probably scattered under the skin a little bit. So hopefully it still reads like skin. You can see that what I did here hopefully didn't change too much of the feeling of how where is it? Yeah, how her facial overall shaping is reading, but over just getting rid of some of this kind of saturated oranges and the green that we're kind of almost seeing from probably subsurface scattering, the scatter colors. We just kind of get rid of that so it feels more to let it diffuse color off the shader, dominate this her face a little bit more. So that way it can do two things. One will be helping the shaping of her face. When something has very strong surface color, or subsurface attributes usually is kind of hard to shape because the things get glowy themselves when light scattered inside them so much. And hopefully this will also help feeling the nighttime a little bit better when we lower that warm color inside the subsurface as well. And let's see. And in addition, let's see what else did I do here. Oh, and then I also am thinking if it's possible, this could be because of the subsurface that was so strong that was losing some of her shaping on her face. I also kind of darkened just like the screen left side of her face, just so it reads more, the key light has a more defined direction that's hitting her from the screen right, and the screen left transitioning to dark. We can kind of see it in the original image that's on the neck. You can see that the screen right side has a stronger, more defined like key light hitting her. The screen left side actually gets a little quite, the value wise you can see there is a quite big a difference here, versus on her face we kind of lose this kind of similar value on this side. So I wrote those down just a little quickly just to demonstrate what kind of value I was looking for on the screen left side. And same thing with the lips. I think it's possibly related to the shader issue. I slightly just darkened the lips a little bit so it doesn't look as orangey in this blue, almost predominantly blue filled environment. So hopefully that the skin can still read as a warm color, but not it doesn't feel like it's being lit by a warm, or just by itself it's like a warmer glowy surface. And in addition to that, I think the background in general is working fairly well. I still think that we can possibly lower this lamp a little bit, mostly on just this shade, this lamp shade, just so we don't have these busy pattern that's very contrasty that's distracting us. So if we can slightly darken this overall to possibly, I'm gonna say, hard to tell, we could probably darken like 30%. So what I'm looking for is enough, darken enough so that these strong contrasts don't stand out, but somehow still has some separation between this lamp shade against the background wall. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have for this right now. I think the character, the body shaping looks great. The hair over looks good. I am still seeing a little bit of color discrepancy on the hair highlights. I can see that this color is more neutral. I can see the yellow tone in here, and there's a lot more cyan here on the top. So we just might have to look into if these are two separate lights, or if there's anything we're doing in comp that's creating this color differences. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have for now. And I would love to see how this whole thing plays out when the shot is moving, because when the character is moving, it definitely presents a lot more challenge. So yeah, does anyone have any question? Is that all the stuff? Let me see. I think this should be good. Okay, does anyone have any question for me right now?
No, thanks. Everything was clear.
That's good. And oh yeah, Abishek, I'm sorry I didn't see the DM. I will give you my email so you can. The DM is so confusing because the DM doesn't have the same name as the username. But anyway.
Okay, no problem. Linda, I want to ask you, can you suggest me some dark skin tone dolls?
Sorry, I couldn't quite catch that. Can you repeat that?
Actually, I was looking for a dark skin tone girl as a reference. I'm actually working on an animated search. I'm
Uh-huh.
just selecting the references.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So I'm not able to find exact dark skin tone girl actually. Any idea or any movie you can suggest me if you have in mind?
Yeah, I'm really sorry, Abhishek. Like I think I'm not sure if today the setup's a little different. I'm having a little hard time to hear your sound, to hear your voice clearly.
So, hello.
Yes.
Are you able to hear me now? Hello.
Hold on. Let's see.
Hello.
Is it just
Now are
me,
you?
or is it clear for everybody else? Is it just me that I'm not hearing his voice? It's kind of sound muffled.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, it sounds muffled.
Oh shit! I lost my. Oh my goodness. I touched my headset and then now I lost the freaking. Let me leave Discord and come back. One sec.
That's what Tommy Lee Jones said to me too. He said he couldn't sanction my buffoonery.
hello. Now are you guys can able to hear me?
Yeah, that sounds better, Abhishek.
Thanks for. Sorry, Justine.
Yep, no problem.
Yeah. Actually, I was asking that anyone can
Got
suggest
it.
me
You get the very,
dark
very
skin tone
fabulous.
color.
Okay.
Well, actually,
Why
I
don't we
was
do
looking
this? Why
for
don't
any
we get?
reference for
I
that.
don't know what I want.
I am actually
Okay,
working
no
on an
worries.
animated short, but I still on the reference, looking for the references. And
Did you ever what's that? Moonlight. Moonlight's a really good one. The movie Moonlight, do you know that?
not sure, but I will definitely check out.
It's not animated, it's live action, but I'll send you links for that, Abhishek. It's really good.
Oh, thank you.